I think no matter what, a story has to be told for an organization. The difference is in startups, you have to get your story out there even more because you're unknown, you're not known, you're not in the market. I love to say here is that the customers and consumers pay your bills. So they keep your business running. The great aspect that startups have is the ability to tell their story, get it right, and continue to tell it, but not beat it. So continue to tell your story and let it speak for itself. Don't overcomplicate it. And that's a great point to make. I think the most common mistakes would have to be trying to prioritize the e-commerce solution for internal processes and scalability internally rather than seeking the view of the consumer. The grow at all cost mindset, and again, this is just my thought process. A lot of times it can be detrimental to a startup because you're just that mind frame and that mentality really messes up the entire organization, from hiring to your 1, 3, 5 year plan, from your 30, 60, 90 day plan. I think that your mentality is shifted completely to, I will do absolutely whatever it takes to gain market share and beat my competitor, rather than saying, no, I'm going to take a step back and say, I'm going to grow as necessary and with a good flow and fashion, continue telling my story, continue gaining those fanatic customers and consumers.
Hi, my name is Rahi and I'm an e-commerce retention expert. I welcome you all to the 6th episode of Retention with Rahi. Today we have Glen Swindell as my guest for the podcast. He is a founder of Orange Core Group and provide practical consulting, fractional leadership and digital solution. He is a fintech and e-commerce executive specializing in navigating companies through growth from the initial stages to the complexity of mid-market. He was an army veteran and where he developed a foundation in servant leadership. His expertise lies in crafting growth strategies, excelling in business process optimization, and mastering the commerce churn and retention part. And this podcast is all about retention. So let's welcome our guest, Glen Swindell. Hi, Glen. Welcome to Retention Rahi. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much for having me.
So, given your background as army veteran, how has your experience shaped your leadership style and especially the fast-paced world of fintech and e-commerce?
I think the Army as a whole just prepares you for a fast-paced environment and requires you to be adaptable. Being in the Army, you really have to focus in on adaptability. And so being in the fast-paced market of technology, especially when it comes to the realm of e-commerce and fintech, I think has really been essential.
Okay. So what trends you feel like, because we are recording this in 2024. So what's your prediction or what's your bets on the trends for this year, and where you feel that fintech and e-commerce are going for this year?
Yeah, I think as a whole, when you look at e-commerce, it's definitely going to scale up. Obviously, e-commerce is the future. So if people aren't really getting on board with processing payments and selling solutions online, I think they're behind the turn. As far as fintech, I definitely think it's opening up another realm of fintech within the atmosphere of technology and payment solutions. I mean, you have open banking nowadays. You have solutions for global payments, merchant of record solutions. I think the scale in 2024 will certainly increase for technology upgrades and scalability for the fintech vertical.
Okay. Yeah, so we would want to touch upon open banking, but the most common feature which fintech feature which came up recently is like buy now pay later, and there has been a lot of buzz, especially during COVID, on buy now pay later. Now it's sort of like some companies were struggling in this field, but still it's a very big part of what we promote and what we push. So what's your take on that? Like, what's the current state of buy now pay later, and do you feel it's like a step in the positive direction, or like it will fizzle out?
Great question. And thinking back in my career, I previously worked for an organization that was focused in on buy now, pay later, and we sold those solutions, buy now, pay later solutions. And the I think there's a good thing about buy now, pay later, as well as I think there's some thought processes around just the governance and risk aspects. But as far as the availability of that buy now, pay later option, it really allows, middle families as well as low income families to be able to obtain items or solutions or services online that maybe they weren't able to do in the future or previously. So I think that buy now pay later is great, but I think it definitely needs to be looked into as an organization as a whole to ensure that there's governance, there's sustainability for that, processes, but also to make sure that implementation of that, you're scaling with that customer service as well, because scaling in that opportunity could also lead into the additional customer service needs.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like people definitely spend more when they are using like buy now pay later, and it's like we have seen run multiple tests where with buy now pay later or like after pay or like Sezzle, people tend to have higher ticket size. So that's definitely there, but yeah, and it's a like a positive. I think it's a win-win for the customer, like you said.
Yeah, I agree. I think the only thing when noting, buy now pay later is that um, I think the ticket size definitely increases, but I think a lot of people the consumers just should ensure that they are understanding and aware of the overall buy now, pay later solution, just because it is a higher interest rate. But I will say a huge benefit of it is also that it's no hard credit check, but it does report to your credit bureau. So I think it's a great opportunity.
Okay, like the point you mentioned was like a, for a caution for the consumer, and yeah, yeah, definitely. Like I think with all fintech, they should have that like terms and condition applied sort of line. So, okay, okay. So, in terms of like you mentioned about open banking and this, so if you can elaborate a little bit for our listeners, because many of might not be aware of like what is open banking and what is like the merchant. What you mentioned earlier. So
Yeah, so the merchant of record solution is really honing in on that global expansion portion. So when you think of a merchant of record, it really gives the ability to go global by a light switch. Essentially, by utilizing a merchant of record solution, is providing the payments, fraud, tax, compliance all in one. So you're able to expand to sell products in Africa or in China or India just by provided solutions from the merchant of record, where they also calculate, they obtain, and then they remit all of the taxes back to that local entity. And so a merchant of record solution is fantastic for those that are looking to scale globally on a fast scale.
okay, okay, yeah. So most of the brands, like because we work with multiple e-commerce brands, and they use like mostly PayPal or Stripe for their payment collection, and some of the brands like have to have PayPal because they have tried removing it and they are not. But mainly for the global audience, like not for US audience, but like main for global audience, like Stripe or PayPal. So where does this fit into this? Like, will these companies will have this solution, or some new startup or some new solution will come in this merchant of records? So,
A lot of people say the solution is great or it's a dying breed. So it's really a personal opinion on that. But as far as PayPal, most in reference to your PayPal description, most merchant of record solutions provide a direct source of PayPal embedded within their merchant of record solution. And they provide those payments alongside it. So everything is combined into one. When you speak in regards to Stripe, I like to call Stripe an a la carte menu, similar to a taco bar, because you're able to go to Stripe and say, I want payments, I want invoices, and I want tax calculation. All of that you're able to get. From my knowledge at this current moment, what Stripe does not do is obtain and then remit the taxes on a global scale. They allow for the payment transactions and calculation, but they may not, at this moment, actually remit them back to the local entities.
Yeah. And I think most of the companies, I don't know, like, do they even need to like report back to local authorities? Because most of the companies where they were registered, they mail bill to that and like look, and they pay taxes in that. So is there any requirement, like what I'm from a like a D2C brand owner perspective, like do they need to care about this, or is it a like a big problem sort of?
So, on a a lower scale startup, SMB approach, I would say it's not something that is of extreme crucial necessity. But once you start scaling out and you start, I'd say doing 40 to 40% or higher transactions globally, you need to ensure that you're utilizing those capabilities for the transactions of calculating and then remitting it back to the entity. Because what happens is that if I am a new startup and I want to sell in China, if I don't have another solution that's providing the local entity already, I'm going to have to go to China and upstand my own local entity and use my funds to do that. So it's extremely expensive. It's extremely time consuming to do it on your own, but utilizing another platform allows for that ability to do so.
Okay, so it will like for at a scale, and for like for local expansion sort of a thing. So that makes sense. That makes sense. And in terms of like from a payments perspective, like like for e-commerce brands, so is there any like go-to strategy to optimize the payments? Because there is like lot of uh, like, not from subscription perspective, we can discuss like subscription, but also like from a one-time payments. So is there any optimization strategies or like your recommendation for to reduce that, like increase the success rate and reduce that friction between the payments?
Yeah, I love the question there, and I'm sure as you started answering or asking that question, you saw me smiling because I truly love e-commerce and I love the optimization portion because I think it's something that a lot of folks don't see as the ability to really scale their business. A few things that I would note is that when you're looking to ensure that you're scaling and optimizing your e-commerce, obviously you can do some conversion rate optimization, but let's get down on a more easier level that you can look at rather than having to hire an expert. Sometimes you can look at the fact of how many checkout pages does it take and what's the flow, how many processes does it take for your consumer to put it in the cart, and then once they're ready to go to the checkout, how many pages is that process looking like? Because the more pages that you have, the higher chance you're enabling the consumer to abandon the cart. So if you can if you can utilize a one-page checkout, you're really increasing your chances of conversion and reducing your cart abandonment rate, which is huge. And then additionally, optimizing the payment methods, providing the popular payment methods such as PayPal, Apple Pay, Google Pay, but also using the geolocation for your e-commerce page to ensure that local payments are provided to your global consumers as well.
And I think, yeah, like for most of the platforms, I think now Shopify or like Magento, they are mostly on one page, but yeah, there's still, I've seen multiple brands. Either they are building their custom one, or once they get this, like they add more or less, and mostly like not for D2C, but like for mostly I've seen marketplaces and other brands tends to have like a lot of complications on their checkout. So I think definitely that will help with the conversion. And in terms of this, because there was a Shop Pay where there was a lot of buzz which was launched from Shopify, I think 2 years ago, and there was a lot of that will replace, and Shopify also pushed that. But now it's not that. So what's happened there, and like what's your take on Shop Pay? Like, is it?
Yeah, I mean, I think Shop Pay is a great solution. There, I, if we're referencing the drop off or anything, I think as we spoke about earlier, there's so much innovation within fintech that the scale growth and then the adaptability of the market, you really have to go with it because new products, new technologies, new players are coming into the game. And so I think some other organization or, platform, don't want to say exactly, but, replaced ShopPay's, primary, resource in the market. But I definitely think ShopPay was and has been a very great utilization because it provides that link and ability to have that secure payment method and then just sign in and go through that flow extremely quick and fast. So I think that if you're thinking about a certain payment process or payment solution technology right now, I think, give it 3 to 6 months and there'll be another one in the market that's heightened just because it's that
Fast moving space.
that fast. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, 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 definitely. Like from a, yeah, because there's always like new solutions. But I think old players also keeps on adapting, and it's very tough to because it's a like a competitive space. Coming to this part, like what does the orange core group and basically I wanted to reach out like discuss the consulting part and like what's the common feel like common issues or common learnings you have for a startup or like for e-commerce startups founders, so from like in their leadership style or what they can adapt.
Sure. I'd say the three main topic points and the three solutions that we provide primarily and we see that are of biggest demand is one being the business optimization portion, being I come in and look and dig down deep into their exact processes. How are they processing their business? Start from prospect to then qualifying handoff. How's that going? Are there any internal pieces that could be optimized? And really just scaling the approach of their entire business for better optimization. Additionally, it's just that sales and that leadership ability coming in and taking a look at their KPIs. Do they have the right playbooks? Do they have the SOPs for training and ramp up to really reduce that time? Because time is money, especially when you're hiring on new sales. So that's a big portion that we focus on. Additionally, is that e-commerce portion. So many startups nowadays are really in that e-commerce space and selling and utilizing those methods. And so bringing in someone with that experience and that understanding of really what does it take to get the best conversion, the best retention, and then have the ability to scale globally, I think has been a big factor. And I'd say those are the three main business options that we focus on.
Okay. Yeah, so mostly like from a early stage to then optimization. And so what does it take to like convert and like retain users? Like, let's start from the conversion optimization. Like, what kind of, from a, not from a like a special tactical perspective, but like mainly from a mindset or like from a strategical point of view.
So when we're speaking in regards to um, ensuring that the consumer converts, I think that approach is ensuring that your checkout flow is optimized for them. And then that customer experience, keeping that traction within the consumer. So ensuring that your follow-ups, your threads, basically the drip campaigns for, hey, happy birthday, or just really leaning into that personalization of the consumer, I think is great.
Okay, okay. Uh, but from a like when you start working with a company, so what common pointers, or like the what's the common trend you see among them, like in the terms before uh, getting that mindset and like after getting that conversion or retention help?
So the mindset usually is just pretty much go as fast as you can to get as many customers and consumers as possible. I think stepping back, and what I see is startups needing to take a step back and understand the flow from the customer's standpoint, and that's really where we come in, is bringing that expertise and showing them, hey, stand in the boots of the consumer. Are you gonna want to go through all of these checkout pages? Are you going to feel comfortable providing your information at this standpoint? Does it impact the conversion rate if you have a pop up from a for a discount when somebody tries to leave your website? Thinking about all of these things really raises the conversion rate. And sometimes startups are so go, 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 they sometimes need to take that step back, bring somebody in with that expertise, and just heighten their sales overall.
Definitely. And in terms of customer lifetime value, or like from a retention perspective, so what's your like go-to strategies, or like the best recommendations for the startups, or where you feel even like approaching from a different direction is like where you feel the low-hanging fruits are there, like or what's the most common mistakes which can be fixed for retention and customer lifetime value?
You know, I think the most common mistakes would have to be um, trying to prioritize the e-commerce solution for internal processes and scalability internally, rather than seeking the view of the consumer. Because if you don't have a checkout process that the consumer will want, then you're not going to have a good conversion rate. And I think that's really the low hanging fruit that someone can obtain in those companies, is just by changing that one aspect and that one mindset of stepping outside of the company and viewing it inward. And I think that overall LTV, lifetime value, is going to be accentuated, because then you're providing that experience where consumers want to come back and spend more, whether it be a one-time payment or on a subscription basis. They're going to want to continue to pay for that subscription.
Okay, okay. And how you balance this, like from a long term versus short term perspective, like because typically brands, like you mentioned, that they want like most customer in the shortest time. So, like how you optimize, or like is there any like uh, pattern, or there is like prioritization metrics which you use for like building the balance between like short term versus long term?
Yeah, the A/B testing within the overall uh, strategies with checkouts and the flows there would be huge. Would be necessary to look at, and you'll be able to utilize that data for that short term and long term effect. But also focusing in on, if you are a subscription based organization, taking a look at, if you have packages, what package sells the most. prioritizing the one that maybe you make the most actual revenue on. What's the best retention rate? Is it a 3 months, 6 months, 12 months? Prioritize those packages because it gives you that short-term effect, but the long-term value because you're able to optimize your overall view and your checkout to the consumer to where now you're prioritizing a package that may be relevant currently. And so really honing in on that ability for that short-term aspect of that 3 month or that one-time pay, but also taking a look and saying, okay, here's these packages, and I'm going to prioritize this one because it sells the most. And also, I'm going to have a toggle that says monthly and then annually save 20% biannually. That really triggers the eye there. And so now you're prioritizing your annual basis and getting that revenue up front with a long-term strategy of 12-month customer.
Yeah, yeah. So, in your experience, what's like how important is the subscription, and what's the percentage you are seeing in the subscription, from a D2C brand? Like, is it because there was a lot of buzz, not buzz, but there was a lot of interest around subscriptions, and there was a lot of interest around curated boxes. Curated boxes have I think fizzled out, but subscription still have value for the users. But so what's the current numbers you are looking at? It's a major percentage of the businesses, or it's still in the early days?
Yeah, I think it's certainly major. The most organizations that I at least deal with in startups are really utilizing the subscription-based business for two factors. Number one, it makes the software services solution accessible and attainable for the consumer overall because they're not having to chunk out a change if it's a one-time payment of $10,000 and let's make it even $12,000. You can put it on a monthly subscription plan for $1,000, and it's much more attainable. So overall, subscription-based businesses is fantastic for consumers. But then looking inward at businesses, you're providing long-term revenue rather than just the short-term revenue. So you're able to scale out a little bit further based on that scale as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But the churn is subscription is not that easy business to be in. It's very the churn and the key retaining the user and making them to one time is fine. What you mentioned about that breaking the payment into three batches, but or providing the value in batches, but mostly for the brands. What's your strategy around churn and handling churn, and how you help the brands with their subscription plans and increasing the shelf life or the duration of the subscription?
Leaning into that annual approach of providing a certain percentage, discount for that annual subscription, essentially for that platform, I think is fantastic because you're not, just leaning on that month to month. And when you look at other platforms, if you're paying month to month, you're going to pay higher just because companies see that churn and retention per portion is much, much significantly harder. And so that's why leaning into that annual approach and providing that smaller, discount, even if it's a smaller discount, it's bringing in that 1 year commitment rather than that churn. And I think that's a big portion of what organizations can do is really hone in on that annual payment. And something that's very simple to do within the checkout flow process is when somebody goes into the pricing page, there's usually that toggle. There's that little toggle that says monthly and annual. Make it automatically positioned to annual, and then the consumer will have to switch it over to monthly because annual, they see it immediately. The psych says, oh, I love this price. But then if they change it over to monthly, it's a much higher price. And so consumers primarily want to lean in to that annual price, which also assists the businesses.
Definitely, definitely. That's a like a good strategy, and basically the price is always better on the annual terms. It just uh, it takes sometimes like people want to try out for 1 month or 2 months, but then I think once they are committed or like they are finding the value in the product or like in the subscription, then going for one like a yearly subscription will definitely save them a lot of money. And
I think
yeah,
one thing that I also want to note is that if subscription platforms look into that free trial, whether it be a 7 day, 30-day trial, what have you, providing that free trial really raises the conversions because now consumers are not so, um, having that cold foot to put $20 a month forward. You're providing them the availability to take a peek inside the platform, get them to love it, and then make them say, "Oh man, I can't live without this, so I'm going to pay that $20 a month." Honing in and utilizing that free trial strategy is huge.
definitely, like I think free trial, mainly for like a product based, it becomes little bit tough, like on the product free trial. But we have seen where it's like the one time purchase is mostly turned into like a subscription, because if they are paying, so Amazon does it really well, where they like if you are placing an order without a Prime, they will just like make the Prime cost as a part of your regular order, and it will become like you can take a trial without any cost. So I think those kind of strategies can definitely give it a taste, and but it's little bit tricky in the product space. So anything particular you feel that brands can do to get into like in the product or boxes games?
So I think the what brands could really hone in on the back end for product wise is utilizing I wouldn't say an all-in-one solution, but utilizing a subscription-based platform, whether it be homegrown internally or a third party that provides those the entire flow really of the subscription. So building out the packages, building out the subscription plans, utilizing that geo-based location for taxes, and then also leaning into that pop-up functionality of if somebody goes off of the page, it pops up and gives them a discount, or utilizing that functionality for the toggles. So I think on product side, there are some outstanding platforms out there that you can utilize for your subscription-based platform that will just integrate in with your website and be a fantastic functioning subscription platform internally for you.
Yeah. And with the AI coming in, like because last year, since last year, I think there has been a lot of fast movement in the AI world of AI. So how's that impacting the e-commerce and the fintech?
Yeah, the when you look at the AI within e-commerce, a lot of items and platforms and services now are coming with the subscription-based platforms that have X amount of AI credits. And when you talk about usage-wise subscriptions, that
Yeah,
becomes more challenging because you're having to go for each individual user once
yeah,
they sign up, okay, you know, they get 100 AI credits a month. Well, whereas this person pays $100 more and they're getting 100,000 AI credits. So
yeah,
the usage base, you're really seeing a lot within the AI field
yeah.
of additional metrics. I'm sorry, additional credits for each of the um, packages. And so
Okay.
the AI is really floating into all of these packages. The
Yeah,
more and more that AI just comes into the market
yeah,
as it is, you're going to
yeah.
have to start utilizing the functionality of usage based subscriptions just
Okay.
because everybody is going to want to offer AI and AI credits
Yeah,
to their consumers.
yeah. But is it like because most of the services, like because every subscription, like you mentioned, are giving some AI credits and all. But is it functional? Like sometimes I feel it's just a wrapper on ChatGPT APIs, and like you use OpenAI and APIs, and like you just created a wrapper just to get on the like the bandwagon of AI. So is it like you feel that it's really thought out, or it just like a jerk reaction to the whole like the disruption of AI?
I definitely think it's honestly, it's dependent upon what organization and what platform it is. I think that some organizations really are just hopping on the train by doing something very, very small and providing that AI solution just so their package seems a little better, or they can maybe get another $5 on a subscription. So I can see that from some platforms, but I will say there are some outstanding platforms out there that have utilized AI functionality in a way that truly has transformed their entire platform, and has transformed their entire market. So their TAM, which is total addressable market, has astronomically increased because they're providing AI now. And so they can be more competitive. So I really think that it just depends on the platform, program, company that's utilizing it, because some absolutely are just, putting together a little chat bot, and it's
Yeah,
AI
yeah,
to them,
yeah.
and some are actually providing a fantastic solution.
Yeah, yeah. No, definitely, definitely. Like, it totally, yeah, depends from brand to brand, but yeah, and it, I think, happens in all the industry.
Yeah,
Like, it's pressure from investors, also like pressure from customers, also. So,
yeah.
yeah, 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 and like because this also leads into the like if we can optimize the experience, or if we are able to like add value to the customer experience. So what's your this thing like approach around designing a customer experience? Like you go through the journeys, or like you create a customer journey, or you, because e-commerce has a standardized journey. So what's your approach around like improving the customer experience, and how far the brand should go or a startup should go to improve their customer experience?
The strategies that would, bring a organization, I think standardization, a one size fits all
Yeah,
solution,
yeah,
is kind of a legacy thought, in my opinion,
okay,
simply because nothing is going to work completely cohesively for everybody.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And so, strategizing and understanding your consumers,
yeah,
what are their minds? How do they flow? Utilizing those methods of A/B testing and
yeah,
saying, okay, here's a two cart flow, here's one cart flow. Which
yeah,
one converts better?
yeah,
Thinking through those strategies, it doesn't take a lot of time or effort, but it gives
yeah,
you some darn good metrics to
yeah,
really utilize internally. And so
yeah,
I think that standardized process of um, moving forward with, the customer journey, it's just going
okay,
to depend upon the organization, what product they're selling and such. And it also depends upon if it's a digital good or a physical good.
yeah,
That
yeah,
process is going to be completely different for that customer journey. And
yeah,
so bringing an all-in-one, one size fits all customer journey for
yeah,
e-commerce brands, or subscriptions, whatever it may be, I think
yeah,
is kind of a legacy approach of just analyzing your own business
yeah,
and figuring it out is really the biggest aim point for you to
yeah.
utilize conversions.
Okay, okay. No, definitely. Like I think from yeah, like not from a standard. Yeah, it's like standardizing will be tough, but and especially for the SaaS businesses, like e-commerce typically have the like the product experience tend to be different, but like buying experience tends to be the more or less the same. But like for a like a majority, like not for everyone, but like for a like a plain vanilla D2C brand sort of. But for subscription, it's like every brand has a very complicated approach in that.
Yes,
Uh, yeah, and
you're
like
absolutely
you,
you're
yeah,
absolutely
please.
right. I just wanted to mention real quick. You stated there that between the SaaS products, there's a very similar customer journey, and that's very adequate. That's very factual, because when you look at a lot of digital products, they are a lot of the same customer journeys. I think the biggest thing that organizations need to look at, that differences between the customer journeys, is their overall product. So is your product having to speak a very expansive story to get the consumer to convert, or is your product self-explanatory and it's a very easy product to convert? And so, utilizing that approach and that thought process of that customer journey, do I need to have these packages having a list of the differences with check marks everywhere? Or am I able to do just one small little snippet of the differences? The conversion rates are different depending upon that actual service.
Yeah, yeah. But like, isn't storytelling is part of like every branding activity? Like now, like there is a lot of focus that like sell through emotions. I like every brand has like people go like to great length to create a story. And I think it's a good thing. Like it's not nothing against it, but like I just wanted to ask that from a branding perspective, how is the story required in every sales process, or you can do away without the story as well? Like,
So when you're speaking of a story, I think no matter what, a story has to be told for an organization. The difference is in startups, you have to get your story out there even more because you're unknown, you're not known, you're not in the market, and so on. Within, major brands, I'm not going to say any names, but everybody knows those major brands, major leads generation brands and such. Those don't need to tell a story. All you need to do is go through the checkout process and it's done, essentially. Now, when you're looking at a startup, those startups have to tell a different story and differentiate themselves within the competitive market of their other startups that are in the same field. And so, positioning that statement better is going to increase your conversions. And so I think the biggest thing that startups really need to ensure that they're not overcomplicating their product and over telling a story. I think that can be done. And that don't beat a dead horse in my, as I say, is don't beat a dead horse. Let the story say itself. Don't continue to keep saying it.
so yeah, it's so there is a demarcation. Like, do you need to like even tell your story sort of a way, like, or it's mostly once you become a like a reach a scale. So I think the features and the benefits tend to do the heavy lifting compared to the storytelling. Yeah, I think in the enterprise industry, like if you look at the enterprise part of the section, uh,
Yes.
most of the brands don't have a like a compelling story, or like this
Right.
thing. Even Dropbox versus Box.com, or like those kind of like Box took a enterprise approach. Dropbox has a very like a public story and like a very
Yeah.
known like a startup journey, and still like now Box like I think market cap is higher than Dropbox, so something
Yes.
similar to that. But yeah, so enterprise
And
doesn't need to go through that process.
yeah, that's a great point to mention there is that when you get into that enterprise scale, I feel like so many organizations lose their story. They forget to really tell their story again. They forget to utilize their story in their selling process. And
Yeah,
so when they're trying to be more personalized on that approach, I think that that's where a lot of that marketing aspect and that brand awareness comes into play. Is those enterprise organizations utilizing their story that they once had and they've
yeah,
lost. And so I think that's a great aspect that startups have is the ability to tell their story, get it right, and continue to tell it, but not beat it. So
okay,
continue to tell your story and let it
yeah,
speak for itself. Don't
yeah.
overcomplicate it. And that's a great point to make.
Yeah, most of the yeah, like and sometimes the story has that like trends, so like when I was telling earlier about the like storytelling part and this, also it's more about, because there is a like sustainability has been like for last 4 5 years has been this, and there has been a lot of like vegan and like cruelty free and those kind of and brands use that, and even bigger brands use that to like ride that wave, or like get not wave, but like get that emotion, or like make the like believe in the same values as their customer. uh, but where that fit into the story, because some of the stories which are coming these days, or like the startup stories, have these trends as well. So what's your take, and should you like include these the impact of these like trends, sustainability or vegan or like cruelty free has on the storytelling and the brand building side of things?
Yeah, that's tricky because the market, it really fluctuates, and it's coming more and more into a bigger factor in the market just because so many people are now gluten free and honing in on those more healthier benefits. And I think that the overall story, uh, that I'd say it's an easier approach than most other, talking about a digital good, because if you're looking at a gluten free or a vegan aspect or something, it says it right there on the box. And honestly, you're going to get, if it's a pizza that's, gluten free and a pizza that's not, you're going to know the difference. It's going to say it on the package. And so that story really, that little symbol tells itself, and you're not having to, speak too much in regards to it. I think the differentiator when you talk about vegan, though, I think the word vegan is so broad. It's very expansive. There's so many avenues that you can have those tasting palettes. So while the concept of being vegan is you're vegan, that's understood. But how you utilize the taste of bringing in artificial meat or bringing in artificial cheese, that's something that you do have to tell a story on. So I think it's a different approach because that little gluten free symbol is going to explain itself, but then a vegan product is going to have to tell a more substantial story to gain that consumer, just because it has a much broader approach.
Yeah, yeah, because of the experience, and you need to show that you need to create that trust, that it's like what the process also is interesting, and it's helpful to create that trust factor for the consumer as well. And mainly from the enterprise perspective, because there's a lot of from a sustainability perspective, and like green energy neutral, and like green washing. There was this thing which got on like buying green like credits and all those things. So I was mainly coming from that perspective, that how the sustainability, because most of the enterprise organizations also try to not try to, but like they also promote these and trends, and they have a like active CSR branch. So
The sustainability is very important, and renewable energy and the aspect of that is important within enterprise, especially, but also in the startups realm. Everybody loves a very good social impact story,
yeah,
and so organizations providing that, or basically attaching on to that social impact story,
yeah,
um, is going to be beneficial. And I think the
okay,
more that we think about the social impact, and not only the social impact, but also the longevity of the software that we utilize, can we throw in a more sustainable portion,
yeah,
or is there a more sustainable or sustainable approach for a certain product or something? I think that it's definitely something more and more that we go through.
yeah,
And that's something that I love about the e-commerce game, is that while yes, brick and mortar is still there, and I love brick and mortar, and I love that omni-channel approach from brick and
yeah,
mortar to e-commerce. That
yeah,
omni-channel is huge. But
yeah,
I think what's great is that we're providing a sustainable solution for the long run of people
okay,
being able to utilize their phone to pay
yeah,
for something through their phone,
Yeah,
rather
yeah,
than having to have these big, items on counters to swipe. And I
yeah.
think that sustainability in the future lessens that recycling lessens that plastic and metal that's utilized to build out those
Yeah,
swipers.
yeah, 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 yeah. So I think, yeah, now it ties back nicely to our fintech part. But yeah, like payments have been very, like, I think, very much sustainable, like with this, like it without touch, like the payments, and like using mobile phones instead of your card, and like, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
It,
I
it
think,
definitely is. And I'm excited to see kind of where it goes in the future, just because I think the more and more that we think about it, the
yeah,
more and more that it's present in our mind and our entire ecosystem
yeah,
of professional world,
yeah.
it's just going to be embedded and a matter of fact as a standard procedure to ensure that there's sustainable solutions and renewable aspects within the system, software, solution, and services.
Yeah. So, as a sales leader, what key principles you apply when guiding startups and local businesses through revenue generation,
You know,
mainly for the
um,
revenue part side of things?
yeah, the um, approach that I really think is that don't have the mindset of quote grow at all costs. You know, I always want to tell organizations and startup to grow responsibly. Um, don't forget who your consumer is. Don't forget what your product stands for and that story you're trying to tell. Don't get lost in that those aspects. Grow responsibly with that revenue, because that revenue that you're generating, it doesn't need to be a grow at all cost. It needs to be a substantial revenue flow continually, and grow as needed, as expected. Don't overgrow and have to do those layoffs, or just not have that personalized approach anymore. And so I
Okay.
think that revenue will come into play once you
Yeah.
have that mindset of
Okay.
grow sustainably, or sustainable. Here we go, but grow
Like
with an
from a
actual
long term perspective.
yeah, rather than a
Yeah.
grow at all cost approach.
Yeah, yeah. And most of the startups, I think, I used to like put it on, like, not Zuckerberg, but like break fast and like grow and like break things, that kind of a mindset. And most of the when I talk to startup founders, they have that like aggression to grow at all costs, I think, and that's sometimes counterintuitive. Like it's sometimes harmful for the business. So yeah,
Yeah, I mean, the grow at all cost mindset, and again, this is just my thought process. It is it a lot of times it can be detrimental to a startup,
yeah,
because you're just that mind frame and that mentality really messes up the entire organization, from hiring to your 1, 3, 5 year plan, from your
yeah,
30, 60, 90 day plan.
yeah.
That your mentality is shifted completely to I will do absolutely whatever it takes
Yeah.
to gain market share and beat my competitor, rather than
Yeah.
saying no, I'm going to take a step back and say I'm going to grow as necessary and with a
Yeah.
good flow and fashion, continue
Okay.
telling my story, continue gaining those fanatic customers and consumers.
Okay. Yeah.
um, and I think that's really the approach, and the best option, rather than that grow at all cost aspect.
Yeah. 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 And lastly, to the fanatical customers, like because the like this, we always tell brands to take care of their 1%, and like focus more on their like loyal customers. But sometimes loyal customers tends to have that like uh, 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 like they cheer the brand, but they also try to influence the roadmap or the product roadmap or the strategies. So, what's your take, and how far, from a customer uh, centric organization, or like listening to your fanatic customers? So, how far should the brand listen to those in the strategies or like in the roadmap?
That's a That's a funny question because that was a conversation that I had with one of my startups last
Okay.
week.
Okay.
Because that is a topic and a point that you really have to identify as how are you going to allow your current customers and consumers or your prospects coming on to
Yeah.
identify and modify your overall roadmap, whether it be a 2 week sprint or your long term roadmap.
Yeah.
And a simple short term phrase that I love to say here is that the customers and consumers pay your bills, so they keep your business running. So I think that it needs to be realistic as well, but utilizing that approach from the consumer and the customer of them saying, hey, I need this X functionality or something of that nature. I don't think it's wrong of them, but I think organizations where they miss the beat sometimes is by being transparent with the consumer or the business or what have you, and says no, we can't do that, or we already have our roadmap set for 12 months. What I
Okay.
think is a better approach is consumers and customers, they understand that it takes time for technology and
Yeah.
improvements and such. And so
Yeah.
just be transparent with, hey, I've taken note of what you're saying here,
Yeah.
and we will try to implement it as soon as possible. We'll keep
Yeah.
you up to date. Please take a look at our roadmap online and
Yeah.
see once it's implemented. And so I think that approach is much better. But as a whole,
Yeah.
customer centric approach for organizations absolutely wins.
Yeah.
But I think you have to have a realistic approach and not
Yeah.
just bend over backwards for every small little thing that a customer wants, just because you'll break your company down pretty hard and
Okay.
limit your resources for anything else.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And there might be like pulling you in different directions as well, like from
Yes,
a strategic perspective. So
yeah,
because
it
they
pulls
don't
you
have
off
the full,
completely.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Cool, cool, cool. I think that's pretty helpful
Yeah,
to the.
one moment, if I could, is just within startups, even in SMBs, don't forget that customer centric approach and don't forget your story that you're telling, because the
Yeah,
more and more advancements in technology and the more startups that happen, it's going to
yeah,
become even more and more competitive.
yeah.
So differentiate yourself now
Okay,
so that you have that story to hold on to as you grow. Don't forget it and
okay,
ensure that it's there. Lastly, is that as you mentioned, we are with Orange Core Group, and we
yeah,
provide business optimization, practical consulting, fractional leadership, and e-commerce optimization
yeah,
solutions. And we'd
yeah.
be happy to help anybody that needs some assistance.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. And for the listeners, you can head over to orangecoregroup.com to guide your e-commerce to its healthier core. And I think the whole discussion was, and I think the takeaway for the discussion has been around the healthier core, that you need to create that healthier core. And also the retention also comes over there in the building that healthier core. So I think Glenn is there to help you to get that core. Uh,
Thank you. Yeah,
thank you.
absolutely. I'm here to help anybody that needs some assistance in regards to any of their business approach, even on the KPIs, SOPs, sales leadership. Feel free. I love e-commerce and I love revenue. So I'm sure you do too.